Now we're live. Uh, well, I had a really nice sleep. Spent a good hour in that jacuzzi and turned myself into butter. And I went and slept on that nice bed. Just had a nice Syntho breakfast. A little slurp of coffee here. Anyway, so how are you all doing? Let's see. Yes, look at that nice view. Look, that's the day. That's the day. That's the day. That's the day I'm heading out into. And things to do. I have to go visit my doctor. And a few other people I have to visit. And make it up to the school in the afternoon. And hopefully, hey there, whoever number one is. Good to see you. I just walked around the swimming pool, which is a good thing to do. Kind of resistance, plus no strain. It's good on the muscles. Anyway, so I've had 2.5 nice days here at the spa. And I had 3 nice weeks up there in the deep green. And I had an interesting dream about geopolitics. My brothers and sisters who voted for Donnie Trump, you are going to be raped, and you're still going to want Donald Trump. This is. If you ever saw the TV show in I guess it was the 80s, called Mary Hartman. Mary Hartman started out real slow, kind of ridiculous, and then got quicker and quicker and quicker until it was a mad dash to insanity. Well, that's where we are. Mad dash to insanity. So, back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, 90s even, I was involved in social engineering, politics, and I have this knack at being able to read the situational position. And, and I also have an amazing knack to be at the right place at the right time. And I was in New York City for a number of years in Europe in that period, and I had great teachers. And one of my great teachers was a man named Quigley, who was at Georgetown University in D.C. I was in D.C. In the 60s and 70s, being an anti-war activist. But early on, I realized that the anti-war movement was basically paid for and percolated and motivated by the same guys who were making money out of having the war. The same bankers, the same industrialists, the same fascists were, because when you looked at, and I was a young man at that time, and there were people who were in the movement who were above me and going on about, we have to have this rally and this riot and this, movement and this. And because of my position in the rock and roll world, and that I, we're going to rally, I could get a stage up and sound and do that and take pictures of it, and motivate people. I was a good lieutenant, and so I was in on a number of meetings, and the higher ups liked the fact that I could step back, not get emotionally involved, and see what was going on. So I hadn't really started writing about this stuff, but I was talking about it, and pretty much by 1968, 69, I really was, had it with the anti-war movement because it was, a sock puppet, the usual suspects, And look at Jerry Rubin, great example, He went straight from that to Wall Street, And you look at all the people who were, in that movement, they came from wealth. They didn't come from, street organizing or unions or any of those things, which I was, being exposed to as a local 3 electrician. And nobody, those unions were very socially conscious when they were developed because they had to be. But once they were bought off, they, they couldn't care less about social movement. But that structure was still there. And people would say, hey, Al, you want to, that's why I worked for the Boys Athletic League. That's why I worked with the church council, which not just Catholic, but everybody. And the churches at that time were the entities on the ground doing social movement, And that's why when the racial movement occurred, most of the, look at Martin Luther King. He was a minister, and virtually everyone in that scene were religious folk. And that's when I realized the real makeup of the politics of the time. It wasn't just Democrats and Republicans. And, when I was hanging in Georgetown with Dr. Quigley, he had his own cadre of really interesting folk. And one of those interesting folk was a guy named Gary Allen. And he wrote a book, None Dare Call a Conspiracy. And you should go read that book because it basically, a picture of is this bird, and left and right wing were 2 wings of the same corporate bird, and socialism and capitalism were 2 wings of the same fascist bird. One was state capitalism, and the other was a capitalist state. And that's where the United States, has become since. It has been that way since FDR, if not sooner. Maybe Teddy Roosevelt, but coming from the same Roosevelt family. But it's always corporate wealth that rules. You look at the history of people like Carnegie and Frick and Rockefeller and Morgan and Astor and all of those folks. They are fascists, corporate fascists. An oligarchic state. And whenever they're like when Rockefeller's oil empire was split up, into the 7 sisters, he became the richest man in the world. He made more money than any human being on Earth. And by splitting up his oil company, it just gave him more diversified power over the industry. So, and gasoline was a byproduct they used to just throw away. Kerosene was what they were looking for. But once Edison brought the electric light and Tesla brought, long band transmission of electricity across our country, That was it. So he had to find another. He had conquered oil. Then oil was going to be made irrelevant if it was just there for lighting. So, he changed, he rebranded big petrochemical companies into chemicals and transportation fluids, cars. He teamed up with Mr. Henry Ford, and but the first automobile that was ever made was a electric truck. So these issues have never been technological. They've always been political, that revolve around the economical. But we ignore the truth of it all, that the real reality, we were put on this planet not to be, focused on commerce. We are spiritual creatures living in, these bags of water, right? And now with 5G, 5G is going to, we are water. And the microwave, you ever seen a microwave oven and what happens with a cup of coffee in it? It's, our hearts and our brains can be. And I've just come out of the deep green. And one of the first things I did, I went around and visited all my neighbors, and they're all dying, And I thought being out there in the middle of nowhere, I would be, out of harm's way. But in reality, being out there just makes you an easier target. It's like that. It's not like you can hide. One of the folks that came and visited me sent me an image of my little splash of the deep green. Google Earth. If the powers that shouldn't be ever want to get rid of me, it's no harm, no foul, hitting me with the energy weapon from space. And what happened now? Look, he looks like a piece of bacon. So that's why, in every day and every way, I serve love's co-creation. That's why I have a good time, no matter what. I'm hurting or whatever. Like today, I went and had my little, can't even tell you what that breakfast was, but it tasted good. That waffle was crispy. I only had one, and I had these little. It looks like they clipped off children's fingers with a rose pruning shear, and then boiled them in some viscous liquid, and called it sausages. But they were tasty. Good. Yeah. And that gravy was like, something like number 3 motor oil with little bits of colon in it. It was yum, yum, yum. And the folks were lining up at the trough. I just had my little bit and sat over in the corner and talked to a couple of families. And then I went and swam in the pool for about half an hour, which was good for my joints. And but before why do we pray over our meal? It is to energize. You put your hands over. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Give us our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. As it was in the beginning, is now, ever shall be, world without end. Meaning Alpha and Omega, the Big Bang, all happen at once, right? We're just experiencing this illusion of Luciferian linear time that doesn't exist. So we weren't put here to, be merchants of death. We weren't here to do ceremonies of suffering. We were here to co-create with love, right? And that's why I'm doing a Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei Al-Bob. And hey, gang, this is a little disclaimer. 14 minutes and 46 seconds in. This is a show of entertainment by your Griot Sensei Al Bob. So there's two of you there. Why don't you join the chat? What do you know of history? What do you see around you? A lot of people say history repeats itself. Robert Burton's had, who wrote the book Wisdom of the Overself. History repeats itself like a sour, badly cooked meal. And, that talk about meal that rhymes with deal. Every time you hear the New Deal, right? It's like, the Great Society. These are all rebrandings. And right now, everyone and his brother is desperately trying to rebrand themselves into something other than what they are. And that didn't turn out too good. Between the Civil War and now, we have been in the same holding pattern. And the same demigods have been playing us. That scene out of Wonder Woman, when she goes into this, council of all the big guys who are playing, the war council in London of what's going on in World War I, right? And they're just throwing guys into the blunder of war. And she goes in there and gives them what for. What is this woman doing in here? And she knows more. She can translate more. She understands, military tactics better. She's an Amazon. And she understands the real reality of war, and that is the innocent always suffer. And one of the better scenes, other than Stanley Kubrick's Paths of Glory, the opening scene where Kirk Douglas was going down a trench in World War I, and things are blowing up, and people are going through the air, and mud and blood, and people, and it's like more people died of disease in those senses than died of being blown up, and it destroyed the soul. Meaning, right before World War I, there was this great movement of people realizing what it was to be a human. What that freedom that Jesus was talking about, what that hospitality that Islam demonstrates, what that silence and presence that Buddhism is, what that realization of the mix of the illusion of the material and the solidity of the invisible world of the spirit, which is shown to us through Indian, the Vedas, and these are all the same spirit, right? But the material Luciferian illusion is the thing that runs that spirit away. And we're into it. We're 18 minutes and 36 seconds. It's around 9 o'clock a.m. Anyway, this show is supposed to be a chat. I'm supposed to respond, bounce off of what you guys have to say. And here it is, just one of you there. So, and nothing's changed, And the technological experience that we're having is just a renaissance or a revisitization of what has been part of the human race for the last million years. The universe has been around 16 billion years. Now on the timeline of eternity, that's nothing. On the timeline of the universe, it's universal time. And Earth has been around maybe 6 billion years, and humans in this form have been around maybe 1 million years, give or take. Now, there have been other forms of us because our solar system was, a galactic outpost of great wealth and prosperity, and we are a solar system of abundance, not scarcity. You know, and so we had a number of kick-ass solar system wars. All you have to do is go look at mythology, and mythology is, basically a story of what happened, um, kind of based on what happened. You know, just kind of like the holy books are. Based story of kind of what happened. You know, so anyway, the way that you understand truth of this nature is you have to be able to go into state, to meditate, right? And the way to do that, very simple. You don't have to, you know, go through any, growing up in the 60s, there were a lot of gurus, and there still are, but most of them are flim flam. Whenever anyone tries to have you follow them, where they are the authority, no, the only authority for you is you. You cannot, let go of your authority, of your sanctified, what is the term, when you have a state and that state wants to have the authority, it's an S word. Anyway, you have to be a nation state unto yourself, right? And not be a follower of any ideology or religion or belief structure. So the only way you can get to that plane of understanding is through meditation. It's very simple. You don't need, somebody to open your third eye. You do that yourself. You don't need there are a lot of great slogans that are prayers. My own personal whatever. No, there are a number of prayers that work. I like the Our Father and the Hail Mary because they represent the dichotomy of the yin yang, of the male and the female. That's in both of us. So, okay. We're at 22 minutes and 52 seconds. And I'm going to, no one jumps in here to have a nice conversation with me. I'm going to leave at 30 minutes. So anyway, go onto my playlist, go onto my channel, Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei Al Bob. Go up there on the toolbar and go to the playlist. And there are a lot of, there's a woman named Emily who has, very interesting ideas, very good take on things. She's definitely scholarly. And then there is truly gracefulness. Grace, she is a young scholar who's quite amazing in her own right. And then there's a husband-wife team. Whether they're married or not by the state, I don't know, but they're definitely a husband-wife team. They have a thing called, something news, truthful news, something news. And they are quite good at picking up what's going on. And then there's Jimmy Dore and a few other folks there. And I'm going to stick up some Noam Chomsky because Noam, the older he gets, he's like a nice fine wine. And, and David Icke also. And both of those guys are kind of have their little bailiwick and they kind of stick to it. And if you can dig down into what they say, there's some good little nuggets there. Both those guys. And so go up on my little, playlist on my channel, Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei Al Bob. Hello, number one. Where are you? Who are you? You got a response for me? we start a conversation here, a chat. Oh, because it is at 30 minutes, I'm going to bail. And I suggest everyone who's a fan of Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei Bob start going through the shows. I looked at my numbers, and I have over 600 shows. I am now over the 600 show mark by 20 or 30 shows. And if you just go there and just and watch one, you don't have to watch it all the way through. Watch it. If you really like it, watch it all the way through. If it's an evening show, the great thing I do is I kind of go to the bottom of the screen and push that little red line and kind of look at what the chat is on the side and look at what I'm doing. And if it's interesting, I'll stop and watch. That's a good, because there's a lot of really interesting, good stuff. And the guided meditations are a gem, are very valuable. And each one, we go to a different place, look at a different thing, but the process of getting there, like last night, you should go to last night's Guided Power of Attraction and what that's about. And by, challenge yourself to be conscious enough to navigate that so you can get what you want or what you need, or what I have done for most of my life is navigated my life in service. Now I'm not a master by any means. I'm your Griot Sensei Al Bob, and what that is a storyteller who teaches by example. That's what Griot Sensei Al Bob is. And, Bob is a classification. Owl is a delineation of presence. Sensei is a job definition. And Griot is it's more than a classification. It's a kind of process or connection of being who you are. Hey, Rab. Afternoon, Bob. Okay, so you're out there in Europe, Rab? Is that it? Because it's afternoon, you're about 5 hours ahead of us. Or you're in Asia, where you're a whole day ahead of us. So I'm not quite sure where you are. But it's good to hear from you, buddy. And this is just my morning ramble. And I've been in a very nice hotel. A friend of mine put me up here because he knew that I was coming from, Cadillac camping in the deep green. Scotland. Oh, I love Scotland. I love Edinburgh. That's a great school, great town, great neck of the woods. How far are you from Scotland? So they say. And have you ever been up to, where the stones are, Stonehenge? What's your take on Stonehenge, Rab? And have you investigated any of the monoliths and pyramids that are in your neighborhood? Have you ever hung out with the Druids and the Bards, right? Or any of the Celtic folk? The true ones, not the, I used to have, I still do, I guess. A number of my teachers were indigenous people, and they were grandfathers. They were shaman. That's why I'm a shamanistic, psychosocial, cultural, forensic, anthropologic alchemist. And every one of them I kind of bumped into in a synchronistic way, to the point that they realized that, oh, you're meant to be with me. You're my grandson. And I was pretty young. I was in my early 20s when I was with most of these guys and gals. And we would go to places, and they would, um, you know, there'd be all these elders, and there'd be me. And they would, what's this white boy doing here? And, Grandfather David. And three of my indigenous masters were named David. So it was easy for me, David. But I would always just say Grandpa. I wouldn't say David. I would take that upon myself. And so there was always, this was in the 70s and 80s, and there was this real Indian movement, AIM, and all of that. And it still is there. And after 600 years of genocide, you could see how indigenous people might be a little wary of white people. So there was always what I would call the tribe of the wannabes, all these white folks who would say, oh, I'm an American Indian, but they were whiter than me. Me, I was just, that's Grandpa. I've never said I was an Indian, never, but that was Grandpa. So, and he would say, that's my grandson. And that's all Grandpa would ever have to say. That's my grandson, right? And they had that kind of moral authority. Whatever they said is what it was. And so, Rab, what's your take on the esoteric, the occult, the indigenous spirit? Anybody else? Any one of you two? Oh, look at that. 32 minutes and 22 seconds. Well, I'll give it a little longer to see what will percolate out of this live chat. So we are now at within the structure of branding. One of the major things you have to do is distract, because people are so set in their path of a branding. Why do you think the Catholic religion is being rocked by their corruption? It's not like they weren't corrupt from the very beginning. The founding fathers of Christianity was in the Council of Nicaea, rich pagan businessmen realizing that their empire is crumbling by exactly what we are doing now, is taking all their money and pushing it into military adventurism all around the world, and forgetting about what was going on at home. And so when the center collapsed, there was no control. So it broke down, and all of their hired mercenaries saw that, we're stronger than the people who own this place, so let's just take it, And that was the, marauding Huns, That was their mercenaries. And the guys who became the Nazis were those same guys, the same Anunnaki, the same Caherzian mafia, These are the same guys, Anyway, so here we are replaying it. They go on about Russia, coercion. Of course, there was no Russian coercion, They just did little things at the side. The real coercion was, Netanyahu walks into, our Congress and gives our Congress marching orders on what to do, without any kind of anything from the administration or the government. He just walks in and does what he wants, and he continues to do that. And we're like his bitches, America's always been somebody's bitch. We're always the odd man out, used and abused. And the general public is so used to being, it's like a whipped dog, that they don't want to step up to their who they are, their raison d'etre of their freedom, you know. And from day one, we have been in a fascist oligarchy, and we're just, the brilliance of the American experiment is that we're constantly being rebranded, you know, just like a cow with, you know, we're being rebranded. And right now, Donald Trump. So when you rebrand the big brand, you have to disrupt it, and that's why we have Donald Trump, and he's like, you know, a great actor. He reads the script, you know. He gets off on what he does, you know. So he is giving tremendous tax write-offs um, to the wealthy and the corporate, and he is de-controlling, getting rid of all of the circuit breakers of politics, you know. All of the different branches are being destroyed from the inside out. You know, the EPA, the Justice Department, the State Department, the military. You know, Russia in 2018 spent $60 billion on its military. We spent $600 billion. Russia has no aircraft carriers to project its might. You know, we have 13 Nimitz-class aircraft carrier groups, and that's a gigantic Nimitz-class, aircraft carrier with small aircraft carriers around it, you know, that have helicopters and Marines and attack aircraft. And then we have missile frigates and, you know, submarines, and we got 16 of those, and we are building even bigger. We now have the Gerald Ford aircraft carrier, which is like almost twice as big as a Nimitz aircraft carrier, right? Nimitz aircraft carrier is like 3 football fields put together, has 5,000 people on it. A Jerry Ford class is almost twice that size. And what it really has, that's pretty amazing, it has a number of quote unquote nuclear power plants that create 20 times more electricity. So they instead of having steam powered catapults, they have electromagnetic rails that shoot the airplanes off the carrier deck. That means they can launch more aircraft and carry more aircraft. And they also have direct energied weapons on board, so they can shoot down incoming missiles and aircraft and you name it. And so that's just like Rome, the Roman legions everywhere out there, right? And what was Rome's business plan? To absorb, like the Borg, assimilate cultures and sell them crap they don't need. Get them addicted to things like alcohol and tobacco and sugar and opium and whatever else, you know. Give them flat screens and fast food. So that's where we are right now. Same as it ever was, right? Nothing's changed. So what's your point of view of my morning ramble? Let's hear what you guys have to say. And the thing is not to go on about, oh, this is terrible, we have to stop it, or what, when I was eating the children's fingers there, finger food, for breakfast, there were these families, because there are a couple of colleges around here having graduations and the last refuge. So there was these 2 girls who came down, and they almost looked like sisters, but no, one was the mother and the other was the daughter. And there were 4 families, and they were all, kids who were in these colleges or looking at them to go to them. And I would talk to them, and the kids, I wasn't even there. The parents, I would contact, and the parents are even 20 years younger than I am, and talk to them and listen to them. And all the kids did was this, You can tell, when people hold it and use their thumbs like this and just swipe like this, when they, that's when their ambidextric monkeyness truly is enhanced. And all those kids were sucked straight into their screen, and they didn't want to know squat. They didn't want to hear any stories from the griot Sensei Al Bob. But the rest of and then there were older people, my age and older. And those people like me because I'll tell a little story, which leads them into the fact that they can talk about themselves. And then I just listen. And that's what it's all about. So the real deal that I have come to do Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei Al Bob is to personify, to motivate, to incur and bring forth, people's ideas of an alternative to all of this. We need an alternative, not just to rebrand it and do the same thing over and over and over and over again, because it's pretty obvious. No, all the morons who think, these are end times and everyone except them are going to go to hell. No, sorry. Even if we have nuclear war, human race is not going nowhere. Right now, we're at one of the better spots in time. Why do you think we have Donald Trump? Because we have more peace, more affluence, more people. Since the 1990s, over 1 billion people have been taken out of the realms of mud puppets into the middle class working structure, right? From peasants to workers, right? 1 billion, 1/7 of the world's population has been educated, given health care, given a good diet, and turned into consumers. And that's the Roman Empire, based on consumption, right? And well, it's pretty obvious. We have now sustainability. We can keep doing this for probably another 100 years, but it's just another. With each 5-year increment, it's going to get ickier and ickier, and we're going to have more displacer or distraction or disruption, and that's what Ronald Reagan did. That's what Donald Trump is doing. And, in less than a year, he has taken our deficit from, here to like up here, just in a year, right? And he has not replaced it with any kind of anything, And between 1980 and now, our productivity has risen by 60%, meaning our jobs didn't get offshored to China and Mexico. No, they went to robots. The guys who were on the line making Buicks, somebody said something here. Where are my glasses? I can't read that little letter. Anyway, forget about our jobs being taken away. They're being replaced by robots, by AI. And one of the reasons why I'm doing Dreamy Dreamland is to focus on AI, meaning to talk to AI. I found your channel while browsing the YouTube. You got some interesting stories. Your guided meditation was very interesting. Glad I found your channel. So, Rab, have you subscribed? Give me a thumbs up. It'd be nice to get to 1,000 so I could use my phone again. But I'm glad you're part of the cadre, and I'm glad you're part of the chorus. And Rab, tell us a little bit about you. What do you do there in Scotland? Are you a native? What floats your boat? What are you excited about? What do you like doing? What's your astrological sign? What's your favorite color? Arf, 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 arf. So we're going to have a number of wars relatively soon, and millions are going to die. And the wars in Iraq and in Afghanistan and in Libya and Syria were basically us taking over those countries, because we set them up after World War I, and we let them be our ad hoc representative. But after a number of years, those folks said, well, especially Mr. Muammar Gaddafi, he did amazing things for his people. I mean, all three of those countries did amazing things. I visited all three of those countries in the early 70s from Sweden, and they were, yes, they were authoritarian countries, but they were as free as the United States, meaning you could own your own home, you could have your own business, you could make money, you could do whatever the heck you wanted, as long as you didn't say anything bad about, the great leader, And even in Libya, you could say whatever you wanted, as long as you didn't manifest it in anything other than, a conversation in a bar. You were okay. But Mr. Libya, what did he do? He drilled some of the world's deepest wells into the deep part of our water. And we are a water planet, and our water comes from inside the planet, not from the sky. The sky is, you ever have a frying pan and you put a glass lid on it, and you see all the water condensating on the glass lid? Well, that's what our weather is kind of like. The real water, what keeps us alive, we are these bags of water, is that water from Mother Earth. And Muammar knew this and spent some money to dig these deep wells. So his people had really amazing, healthy water, and they used it on, they turned their country of a desert into a garden place and gave everyone a house and education and healthcare. There was enough money to do that. Venezuela did the same thing, Chavez did the same thing. That's why they can't throw the bus driver out. The guy who's now, he was a bus driver, and Chavez liked him and, just brought him into his administration. And so this guy ain't the sharpest tool in the bin, but, he just wanted to continue Chavez's dream. And once Chavez was gone, Maduro, he was a putz, so he was easy to be played. And that's what's happening to him right now. He's being played. And yet the people themselves, meaning in Venezuela, it had been, basically a Nazi place of the corporate junta. And then a number of liberals got into the political structure and started to tinker with it. And that's when there was a military junta in Venezuela in the 50s or 60s. And then the people rose up against them. And they put, Chavez in. And he ran it quite, he was a smart guy. He was an administrator. He did a pretty good job. And I went to Venezuela in the 80s, early 80s, and you could eat off the floor of the subway. I mean, it was just beautiful. Everyone took great pride of their country and their cities, and they had a great life. Educated, healthcare. It was a country of abundance, and then it was run into the ditch. And so, they tried to have a little military junta, go down a week or so ago, but it didn't take, right? And Russia is, we've got two aircraft carrier war groups off their coast. Russia has like two bombers and a couple of fighter planes and a few, assistant guys there. They don't have a military presence, and they, because they can't project a military presence. We're the only people who can project a military presence. And we, ISIS, they're our guys. We put them in power. When we invaded Iraq, and all those generals that we educated, and their armies that they had created with our money, we put them out of a job and then said, okay, here's some money, put on these black hoods and start blowing up our guys. So, I mean, this has been going on for the last 3,000 years, easy. So, it's the problem, action, solution. You want a certain outcome, you develop a problem like, global warming. No. I remember being at a symposium in Brussels in the 70s, where they were talking about, alternative three, that everything, goes through these, this is where I was learning to follow these long-term trends, and so I was sent off to, just observe and be part of this conference. And these guys were talking about the conference that they had in the 1890s in Paris, where they were describing global warming and weather change and geoengineering and controlling of the human mind through electromagnetics, right? And that was in the 1890s. That's where the term petrochemicals, or the idea that oil came from dinosaurs. No, that's not really. Anthony, how you doing, buddy? Just talking about, this is a morning ramble, right? So I'm heading back towards the school, and so I should be able to have access to the internet better than the deep green. So I'm going to have morning rambles where I just kind of ramble on about things, and we'll respond to the folk who later, Rab, come and visit. I'm going to try and do evening meditations at 7 p.m. or thereabouts, and morning rambles in the morning, 9 o'clock or so. So, and I too am going to leave the channel in a few moments. But I just want to give you little things to think about during the day, so you can come to the evening with ideas percolating, firing off in your head. Do you think the Aborigines had this knowledge? Well, they had more than this knowledge. They had knowledge. They lived in dream time, which meant they could be in any time. They, you don't need technology, drugs, any of those kind of things are a really weak, limp biscuit compared to the power of your spirit, of your conscious free will. You can, when you go into state, you can go into any time, any place, anywhere. And I think this evening's guided meditation will be one about time travel. So it's looking like a pretty nice day. I love it when there are the big puffy clouds there, and blue skies, because it's like having a sun umbrella. So, let's see. Anthony asks, are you familiar with the Out of Australia theory? Yeah, I kind of lived it for 3 years. You ever see that movie, The Last Wave? Mm-hmm. And that book by that woman, Dream Down Under or something like that? Yes. Seems to be growing evidence that humanity started in Australia and that they were the most spiritual beings. Well, that theory probably is coming from a white person, I don't think any Aborigines would even, I live with a tribe called the Wamajiri in the Northern Territories near Christmas Creek, which is about 400 or 500 miles south of Ayers Rock. And I spent a year with them. And, I was sent there by the government to do an ethnography on them, to find their sacred sites so we could identify them, because they were about to obliterate the place for coal. And they didn't want to they already had genocided the tribe in the 70s and, took a tribe of about 600 people and obliterated them. And there were only about 9 left. And I was sent there to show that, the government's so sensitive to their needs. Anyway, very Romanesque. And from my experience, I had no idea when I was going to Australia, I had no idea that I was going to spend 3 years there. I really just was thinking of being there 6 months to go visit my good friend Neil and in Melbourne. And I ended up there 3 years doing all kinds of interesting stuff. I was part of the Circus Oz. I helped build the Avant-Garde Theatre of Australia in Melbourne. I worked in the movie industry in Sydney. I worked for an electrical engineering firm that did, big, massive transmission lines and stuff of that nature. Yeah. But anyway, when I was on that airplane flying into Sydney, I was in the back bathroom right as we flew across that line from the northern hemisphere to the southern hemisphere. I pushed the button so the blue water would go down the toilet clockwise, and then it slowed down and went counterclockwise. And when I was in that, watching that whole reality, a doorway opened up, and I was surrounded by stars, and I was hearing the clicks of the ant and the scraping of the turtle and the moaning of the didgeridoo. And I was in Dreamtime, and I was surrounded by black painted faces. And we danced. And then all of a sudden, I had no idea how much time I was in the toilet, but my pants were down near my ankles, and bang, 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 bang on the door. And then I hear the click, door opens up, and the stewardess is looking at my butt and goes, "Sir," and my thumb is still on that button. And I think I've emptied out the tank. He goes, "Sir, you all right? You all right?" And when I turned around, huh? So that was my first introduction to the Aboriginal space of Dreamtime. And then I got off the airplane and had another experience like that, like within hours. And then I kind of, snapped to, and we went back to Melbourne, and I got into a life there. And then a year and a half later, I was asked, because I was part of the Avant-Garde Theatre of Australia, which was sponsored by the government, and the entity that sponsored that was like the National Endowment of the Arts in America. But this thing covered all cultural elements. And they were looking for someone who was capable but expendable. And that was me. And so they sent me down there to do an ethnography and spent a year with that tribe. And they showed me all the corroborees, and they involved me in all their ceremonies. And I photographed and filmed. I had a 16 millimeter Bolex. And oh, so you read X-Rated. Thank you, Anthony. And so that's my experience, right? And all that I've read, all that is published within the construct of the scholastic is usually pretty propagandistic. So no, Anthony, I have not read this guy, but the idea that everybody came from Australia, could be. I have no idea, And, the world was a different place. There were all these land bridges and people moved around. And, there were all kinds of entities that had technology and spirituality, all kinds of things. Like the Aborigines, they don't need spaceships to go visit other galaxies, Okay, I'll do more videos about it. I'm in the process, my writing. Have you ever realized, if you read X-Rated, you kind of realize that my writing is more or less autonomic, meaning I just kind of go into state and type away. And then I go back and edit. And, but still when I'm editing, I'm in state, so I just serve love's co-creation. My writing is love's co-creation. But I'll tell more stories about this. It's been 1 hour and 2 minutes and 26 seconds. So I'll be on for a few more moments and then I have to go. But tonight I will start around 7-ish. And I'll start telling more indigenous people's stories, right? And I'll tell more Aboriginal stories of Australia, right? My experiences. And Mutant Message from Down Under, is that the book? That's not a bad book. That woman had that same experience I did, and I met a lot of people who had the same experience, meaning their consciousness was at a certain level, that they were like a tuning fork or a radio antenna. They were receiving that information. So, and that's why I do my guided meditations with you, the Griot, my cadre, is that I want to sharpen up your antenna. You should be practicing going to state yourself. All you got to do is breathe that 20% in and that 30% out and illuminate yourself with the prana and ground yourself into your chi and allow that photonic light to be captured by your mitochondria. And there you are. So, in about a minute or so, I'll sign off. And so, the thing is that we had to bring out the indigenous in us all, because that's what our conscious free will is our indigenous self, not the meat puppet that we, have as an avatar, So Anthony, keep meditating, go into state, be that Aborigines, right? That's what dream time is. Going into state is dream time. See that clearly. Practice it every day. Okay, I think it's time that I sign off. It's 1 hour, 4 minutes, and 44 seconds. That's a good synchronistic moment. Love you guys. See you tonight. hopefully